Welcome to In Conversation with Brad Wendes. I've got a really interesting guest today, something a little bit different, although it seems like there's a few parallels to previous guests. I'm going to hand over to Matt Gupwell in a moment. We met on the Ninja Warrior UK show, but neither of us are professional ninjas anymore. So I'm going to hand over to Matt. Matt, could you tell us a little bit about what you do now?
Well, definitely not a professional ninja anymore, and I'm not sure I ever was compared to you. But there we go. I was just a bloke in a costume having a go. So, how things change. I am a neurodiversity professional by trade. So that means I predominantly work in education for organisations now. So sort of work with the likes of Sony Entertainment and ASOS and the government and local authorities and anyone in between, trying to help them understand how to support their colleagues and employees who either know or think that they are what we broadly define as neurodivergent. So ADHD, autism, dyslexic, dyspraxic, and a whole host of other things that people often don't understand. So that's the day job. When I'm not educating, I'm on stages as a professional speaker talking about it, which is broadly the same aim, but sort of trying to start conversations. And I'm co-director of two community interest companies that have similar aims, trying to give more facilities and give more help to people in that space. And I also mentor individuals privately who, again, either think they are or know they are ADHD or autistic. So I help them make sense of what these things mean to them and try and unstick particularly problems that they're struggling with at that point. So, yeah, it's non-stop at the moment, which is good. It's the way I like it. Having ADHD suits me.
That sounds busy. That's a lot going on, but you're also a family man, aren't you? How'd you fit it all in?
Yeah. So, yeah, well, wife and I celebrated 25th wedding anniversary this year. So 32 years together. And then I've got two sons, Oscar and Dom, who are 18 and 19. And really, I do what I do because of them. So the backstory, very briefly, they were both, there's 16 months between them in age. When they were both just 4, they were both diagnosed with what was then called Asperger's, which is now autism spectrum. Yeah. They are now both dual diagnosed with ADHD and autism, as millions of people now are, because we can be, couldn't be back then in 2009 and 2011. Yeah. But I do what I do for them because they're at the age where they're thinking about careers. And I don't want them to get to a point where they felt like I did in 2019, because nobody needs to get there. And again, I'm sure we'll come on to that. So yeah, everything I do is for them. My wife's autistic and has ADHD, as well as being perimenopausal, which is now sort of a new special interest for me. And how do I support the women in my life and women I work with? But everything's about them. Ninja Warrior was for them, bizarrely. I only did that so I could make them proud.
Brings me nicely to my first real question is, what did you want to do when you set out? Whether that be like the beginning of your career or when you started to talk about neurodivergence, like where did this all come from?
So the real answer, I suppose, is why from the age of 17 up until 36, it was shocking. I didn't know. I thought at 15 and 16 I was going to be a professional rock climber and be sponsored to go climb around the world, without realizing I was never good enough. Right? I was just fairly average. So that's what I thought I was going to do, and then realized I had no idea and ended up in customer service and various jobs, which is then why, after years of that being an absolute nightmare, in 2009, having been sacked again, and I'll probably talk about that in a bit, I had no option but to lean on what had really always been a hobby, which was entertaining. I'd busked since I was a kid, right, as in street performance. No talent for singing or anything, but I was a juggler and a fire breather and da-da-da. Yeah. So I lent into that and became an entertainer and the jester character that you sort of met at Ninja, right? And that was, for the most part, in my head, great for 15 years. That's how long I did it for. On reflection, it was terrible. On reflection, I was a good entertainer, but a terrible businessman. Right. Because I was undiagnosed ADHD and autistic, because I had no concept of organization, this thing we call executive function,
Yep.
was terrible, and various other things. It just meant I did okay some years and terrible others. But when my kids were diagnosed, I started talking about what it meant to have autism to other people, particularly other parents who were trying to understand their kids, and then in schools. And somewhere at the back of my mind, there was a seed there about I've only got one skill, which is talking and communicating. And I'd known that for decades by that point. And I kind of figured I wanted to combine the two, but didn't know how. So when COVID really hit, having just been diagnosed and me still struggling, the one thing it changed was I didn't feel like I could entertain at that point. I didn't feel like I was the same person. It's a really common story post an ADHD diagnosis. We kind of feel like we're not the same person. And it really hit me. And then that meant that I just stopped. I stopped trying to book entertainment gigs, and I publicly said, right, that's it, done, took the website down.
Wow.
With nothing to go to. I mean, literally nothing, apart from a mortgage, a wife, and 2 teenage sons. Going, this isn't a smart idea, Dad. So I ended up on a building site for about 6 months, which was the single most depressing thing I ever did because I was really unwell. But I was still trying to build this thing with help from a pal of mine who's sort of an angel and investor. He didn't invest in it, but he gave me his mentorship. And it was a real slow thing. I started talking on LinkedIn and vaguely annoying people because I was quite opinionated around 2021, 22. And whilst I did a bit of work and I got a bit of success, it wasn't by no means it was a business. And then I don't know why, I don't know what happened. Maybe I found my voice, but towards the end of 2022, it started to feel like, oh, wait a minute, people are listening to me now. And I'm starting to get inquiries from people I never imagined. And then at the start of 23, January was a bit of a write-off because I was really struggling with everything to do with addiction at that point. And I was beginning to recognize that for the first time ever. Medication changes came into it. But within 3 months of realizing addiction was as much a neurodivergent condition and a problem for me as anything else, the work just exploded. And I haven't looked back since. And I now talk about everything that's affected me and continues to on this daily basis, but it's better than I could ever have imagined. So I went from an idea of I just want to make people think differently. Or, my consultancy is called Think Neurodiversity for a reason. I want people to think before they use this word neurodiversity. What does it mean? What doesn't it mean? And that's my job now. I get to teach people that and educate that.
Brilliant.
But yeah, I'm now at this point where it's like something I could never have imagined. And I'm incredibly grateful for it, but still slightly baffled and riddled with imposter syndrome.
But I think that's par for the course, isn't it? That's I spoke to another guest recently and we kind of discussed imposter syndrome, and the opposite of imposter syndrome is arrogance. And I think I'd rather have a little bit of self-doubt than think I'm the best and not be. I know that's a personal thing.
No, I lived with the arrogance that was clouding or sort of hiding other things for years. And the consequences of that were I never succeeded. But I thought I should, and was resentful of everyone that I thought were the reasons I wasn't. It was nothing to do with anyone else. It was that arrogance and me not being able to see. Being in recovery has sort of taken all that away from me and stripped me back to this point where I'm just incredibly grateful for everything I have and the opportunities I have. And now I'm like you. I'm like, okay, yes, I have this imposter syndrome and self-doubt, but I sort of am beginning to have tools to deal with it as well.
Okay.
And I can look it in the eye and go, okay, why am I feeling like that? Whereas before I'd have run to addiction. Right.
I think
So it's a change, but
yeah. There's a lot of people that I think would benefit from that toolkit. So we work with a large amount of young people with ASD, so autism spectrum. Sorry, what's the ASD? It's autistic spectrum disorder.
Autism, well, it's broadly either autism spectrum disorder, or they might call it ASC, which is swap disorder for condition. Same diagnosis.
And an enormous number of people with ADHD, diagnosed or undiagnosed, do come through our door. So we've got a parkour gym. So the kind of autonomy and the freedom that it allows, and the non-competitive nature, but also facing challenges and methodical thinking, similar to climbing, when you're looking at facing challenges, but not directly against someone else. You've got a challenge to face, and that really appeals to neuro or neurodiversity people. So we've got a lot of experience working with them, and you know, you're saying these things, and there's just so many like fireworks going off in my head. It's like I want to continue talking to you way after this chat finishes. But I got to ask the question that a lot of people say at the moment, which is, you know, where's all this come from? Everyone's diagnosed with autism, everyone, and everyone will say, "Oh, I'm a bit ADHD." Where's that come from? Do you think it's overdiagnosed, or do you think we're just more aware of it now?
No, do you know where I know it came from? Was that it was we lacked knowledge up until very recently. So we lacked the real knowledge of what these things were. And there's so much wrapped up in this. So, you know, if I ask anyone that listens to this to be really honest, and if people can comment, what was the first picture you had in your mind when Brad or I said ADHD? I guarantee for most of you, it's a naughty, hyperactive, you know, destructive boy. Normally in a classroom or causing parents at home. It's not. In fact, that's an presentation of ADHD. But the fact is, that's what most of us think of when we think of autism, right? Depends on your age, Brad. People of a certain age will go straight to Rain Man. People of a slightly younger age might go to various other characters. You know, Big Bang Theory for a long time was, poster boy for autism. Neither of them actually autistic, written as autistic characters at any point. But everyone saw, they're autistic. No, then they weren't at all. Right? That's what the research tells us. So that meant that if you didn't present in one or both of those very stereotypical presentations of what people thought ADHD or autism was, how could you possibly be autistic? Okay, so now we can bring women into the equation. Up until realistically 3.5 years ago, the diagnostic criteria, what's known as DSM-5, and any version before that, right? All of the criteria for autism and ADHD were designed around how boys presented. Not a single girl was referenced. So if you were a girl and you didn't present like a boy with ADHD or autism, guess what? You probably weren't going to get a diagnosis. You were going to get diagnosed with something else.
It presents very differently in females, does it not?
Oh, massively. Huge. Well, can do, but there's also similarities, and again we learn that now. The other thing is, you know, and I said this about my sons were diagnosed autistic in 2009 and in 11 respectively. At no point at that time in our knowledge would it have been assumed that they also had ADHD. It was clinically impossible.
Right.
That's what it was defined as, clinically impossible. You either had ADHD or autism. Now we know current prevalence rates, somewhere between 60 and 80% of people with ADHD will have autism.
Wow.
Right? Now think about that. Now we know that, the world changes. So when we hear people say, oh, everyone's a little bit ADHD, I get it. Everyone's a bit distracted sometimes. Everyone loses things sometimes. Everyone struggles with attention. You know, a lot of the tropes we'll see online about what it means to be ADHD, everyone at some point may struggle with. That doesn't mean you've got ADHD. There's a criteria generally looked for in clinic, which is persistent, pervasive, and problematic. Do these things cause you an issue on a regular basis? And my favorite example of this is, I'm forever losing things. Right. How often do you lose things that then cause a problem to you? Is it once a week? Is it once a fortnight? Is it once a month? Is it daily? How often have you been late for a vital important because you couldn't find your car keys, your wallet, your phone, your glasses that were on top of your head, your whatever? That's problematic. That's potentially, not definitely, but that's maybe ADHD, right? We look for 18 core symptoms to diagnose ADHD. You don't have to have all of them. It's not Pokemon. It's not, collect them all. It's how many of them do you have that cause an issue? But it's very easy to go, well, I struggle with that. Yeah. How often? And the same with autism, because our view of autistic presentation used to be severely socially, emotionally, even physically and verbally challenged. When you see people like me who are autistic, I don't look or sound autistic. When I went on that thing called Ninja Warrior, nobody commented and went, oh, look at that autistic bloke dressed as a jester. It was never going to happen. It didn't mean I didn't have autism. It meant I was doing a very good job of, well, at the time I didn't know myself, but I was hiding it. Often people refer to this concept of masking, right? But it's this thing of, I didn't present as autistic, right? There are 4 of us in our house, each with autism. None of us are the same. So it's not that more people are being diagnosed because it's a trend. It's because more people are being diagnosed because actually our understanding of what these things mean is shifting and it's changing, and it's easier to spot now, and the clinical practice is better. And it doesn't mean, conversely, that everyone's a little bit. You can't be a little bit ADHD, OCD, ADHD. You can't. It's just not possible. You either are or you're not. But within that, yes, you are, is, yes, another spectrum of presentation, another spectrum of challenges, another spectrum of how it changes day to day. So it's, because it's not linear, it's not this binary thing, it can be very difficult for people to either understand or accept. Which is why my mission, and it is my mission, is to stop people talking about the labels first and talk about what it means to you first. What are the things that potentially ADHD makes difficult for you? Why did ADHD particularly lead me to living, with suicidal ideation for so long? Why did it mean I had a higher risk of being an addict, multiply addicted? Why did it mean that my career was likely always going to be a nightmare, right? Those are the things it's more important for me to explain, not the letters that sit behind that. Because the only person that really needs to know, is it a diagnosis, is a clinician.
Yeah. Okay.
Because they're going to treat you or care for you. What you need to know is, what does it mean to you?
I mean, really, really interesting points. And again, I've got my brain doing all sorts of things now. I'm going to jump into my own personal experience for a second and just, because that's all I've got is what goes on in my own brain.
Yeah.
Recently, probably over the last few years, I've been considering the possibility that I might be neurodivergent. And there's probably a few people in my life that are laughing hysterically at the thought of me saying that, because they're like, well, of course you are.
Yeah.
I got a couple of things. The first one being, I've made it well over 40 years with my brain doing this. Is there any point in trying to change it now? If I haven't got coping mechanisms in my 40s, I might as well just run with it, right?
No. Categorically no. Just means you've had to, right, hold on, I was going to make a statement that was probably a judgment on my part. Let me ask you, despite you getting 40-something years to this point, having a successful career and achieving all the things you've achieved, would you say that it's been easy consistently?
Oh my God, no. And I hand on heart, would be far more successful if I weren't my own worst enemy and weren't, doing some of the things that I do. Like constantly double booking myself. It's the biggest bugbear, but or forgetting bookings, or just I have no paper diary anywhere. It just lives up here, or I just kind of wing it. There's lots of things I do in my life that I know are absolutely my own worst enemy.
All right. Do you do them on purpose?
No, God, no. Of course not. It'd be stupid to do it on purpose, wouldn't you?
Well, the skill in me asking that question is this. If you don't do them on purpose, but you can't stop doing them, right? The answer to your question is there. Is there any point finding out whether there's something behind that? Maybe, right? What you've broadly described in your challenges could be wrapped up in something that's referred to in clinic as executive dysfunction. Right? Now, executive dysfunction is your ability to organize your thoughts, carry out tasks, follow steps, keep a diary, not double book yourself, pay bills on time, right? That's the kind of things executive dysfunction makes difficult. It doesn't matter how often somebody says, for the love of God, can you just not? If you consistently can't not, it's not because you're not putting in effort. It's not because you're not trying. It's because there's something in there that is wired differently that means there's typically a chemical imbalance, one of multiple neurotransmitters not firing at the right time, that means it's difficult. But let me ask you a question, knowing what you do and what you did. When you were a gymnast as a kid, because you were a gymnast originally, right? When you were a gymnast, after a training session, and even now after a training session, whether it's parkour or gym weights, what does your brain feel like in terms of the volume, the noise? Is it quieter?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When you're focused on that skill or lifting, it's like going to the gym is like meditation. It clears everything up.
Mm-hmm. And how long does it last?
Probably until I get in the car.
Okay. So what you're broadly describing is the effects of stimulation on your brain that accesses different neural pathways, that gives your brain different signals, that allows you to feel a sense of difference and calm, right? Therefore, is it any surprise that the single most effective treatment in medicine for ADHD for most people is stimulant medication? We chemically stimulate our brains to enable us to think better.
That was going to be my next question.
Now,
actually.
it doesn't mean that we will. Right,
I'm really glad you brought that up, because quite often in those that don't agree with modern medicine, and there's a lot of discussions about medicine and medication in general, is that if your issues are so deep rooted, and if it's in the way that you think, it's not caused by a lack of a particular medication. Therefore, is the medication not just dealing with the symptoms rather than the root cause? So is medication the answer? And you've kind of alluded to the stimulant side. So sorry, I'll let you carry on, but that was my next question. I just want to know the benefit of medication.
No, it's you. I love the way you phrase that, actually, because it makes my answer so much easier. So what does the medication do? It doesn't cure for ADHD, right? ADHD medication, stimulant or non-stimulant, is not a cure. It is a tool. And what it's a tool to do is to say our brains have an imbalance. If you think of it as a graphic equalizer, is a good analogy, right? Each neurotransmitter that we need, whether it's dopamine is the one we hear about all the time, but people get completely wrong and don't understand, or noradrenaline or oxytocin or serotonin, these are some of the main ones we talk about, right? If the balance of those is wrong, your brain is going to struggle to carry out those tasks you need it to carry out. If we can medically, chemically rebalance that, right? It doesn't mean that you will do those things. It means you're more able to do them, right? So there's a great misconception about ADHD meds. Most people know that, no, ADHD meds help you concentrate and focus. Well, yes, but they're not that clever. They don't tell you what to focus on. So if you happen to be down a rabbit hole you shouldn't be down when you've taken your meds, your brain won't suddenly go, oh, no, Brad, no, actually what we need to do is fill in the diary. It will go, woohoo, excited thing, and I'm going to go down the rabbit hole on that. And your focus will be amazing, but just directed in the wrong place. The meds can't do anything to change that. So there's a phrase, again, that comes from clinic, and there's a mentor that I have to use called pills and skills. Right? We have to develop the skills that back up what the medicine does. But for most people, for 2 out of 3 people who can get access to ADHD medication, the improvements they will see over their lifetime are significant.
Okay.
Why would we choose not to have access to that? Right? But it's about the education piece about what meds do, what it means to be medicated, and who has the agency over when we take those medications as well. That's what's missing. And that's what I try and do for a living, right? I try and educate. I work with clinics and clinicians to cut the nonsense that I see online down and tell people the truth. You know, so again, I talk about dopamine. People think dopamine's just a pleasure chemical. It's just a reward chemical. It's not. Not at all. That's just talking about 2 of the multiple dopamine receptors being accessed. The others tell you what not to do. The others tell you when you've done something that you shouldn't do. So now we have to know what do we need to do to balance everything within the dopamine conversation. But people think of it as a one as a switch. So either on or off. I hear people talk about, oh, I'm going to do a dopamine dump. Please don't, you'll die.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a short answer to anyone online saying, here's how to do a dopamine dump. No, please don't. Yeah. Right? Well, I'm going to do a dopamine dotut. No, don't do that either. Actually understand what it's supposed to do for you in the first place and then think about it more logically. But that's, again, that's the problem. But this is, you said something that's really important. You said there are people in your life who are laughing when you say, I wonder if I am, and they're going, well, duh. Yeah. You are not alone. It happens all the time, right? Why are you the last person to join the dots? Because you're so busy trying to cope that you don't stop to go, could it be? I wonder why. We don't make time to do that, where other people see the struggles from outside and go, dude, I've seen information and this fits. Does it mean it is? No.
The exhaustion and burnout that comes from kind of masking and you know, trying to do what you're supposed to do, and you get home and you just got nothing left.
Now, Brad, thank you. You know what? Do you want to make a clip for the video that I can steal? Can I have that you said, not me, for a change?
Absolutely.
So you use this word masking, right? Masking is really important. Masking is this concept, and people will hate me for using that word, but it is a concept. The concept is that when we go out into public life, we put on this mask because we've been forced to conform in certain ways and forced to behave in certain ways. And it's those evil neurotypical people that don't have anything that have made me mask. Nonsense. Because for 46 years or 45 years, I thought I was neurotypical, and never once did I get out of bed go, do you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to make it really difficult for people with ADHD. Yes. No, I didn't. Things are the way they are because no one's ever stopped to think, could they be done differently? There's a more realistic conversation, right? But what you said is the important piece. It's not that you go out and you mask and you put your professional face on when you're having a professional meeting, or your parkour face on when you parkour. It's not that. It's how exhausted you are when you get home. That means now I can't actually give my kids as much attention, or my wife as much attention, or I haven't got the energy to make those phone calls, or cook dinner, or pick up my washing, or do all the other things that are a trail of destruction because you're spent. Because if you then have to do that as well, you now can't go back to work the next day and perform at the level you feel you need to perform at. That's masking. That's the issue, is for people with, it's more exhausting. And I wish we spoke about that more than, oh, I have to mask. Yes, we all do. Everyone's been masking since the first time you went to any setting with another human being, because you looked at them as a toddler and went, are they playing with that toy? Maybe I should play with that toy. Are they laughing? Maybe that's masking.
Yeah.
Right? It's copying for reasons. When it gets difficult, that's when we've got to pay attention, when it causes problems. So there's your education piece again. And the kids you talk about coming to your place, you will see it. You will see them, I almost guarantee, coming into sessions completely discombobulated, high as a kite, right? First 10 minutes been an absolute disaster of behavior and attention. And then as they get it all out of their system, it all slows down, and suddenly they start doing skill progression and doing stuff that they didn't know they could do. And suddenly their behavior's a bit better and their ability to listen's a bit better. And then their parents pick them up and go, this is great. It's like medicine, because it is. Right? That's again the effects of their school day, for example, or their college day has been so dysregulated that they need that outlet somewhere else before now go do your homework or whatever it may be.
Yeah. So you and I are, I mean, I'm a little bit younger than you, so I'm 41. So there's a couple of years between us, but I think we're of a roughly similar generation when it comes to labels. There's another issue with people who are a little bit older, because it's a general sweeping statement, but a lot of the younger generation, particularly younger Gen Zers, who are more than happy to give themselves a label to say I'm this and I'm that. And I think those of us that are a little bit older, you don't want to stick a label on it, or potentially pretend like you've got an excuse for having not done something or made a mess or not been successful. Like there's that whole thing of personal responsibility. And if you're blaming some imaginary medical condition, it's just you making excuses for not being successful. I think there's a little bit of that in our generation.
But the reason is exactly why you asked the question a few minutes ago. Is there any point?
Absolutely.
You're asking that because your imposter, your 41-year-old goes, oh, come on. All of a sudden, I'm going to say I'm 41 and it's this. Oh, yeah. And who's going to believe me? It doesn't matter. It matters that you struggle. Now, yeah, there's a generation, Gen Zers particularly are much quicker typically to bang a label on, self-identify. I've got this, I've got that, which is fine. I'm all for that to a degree. But it has to come with explanation, not attack. And very often it comes with, oh, I've got this, I've got that, I've got this label, and it's your fault.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's my fault you've got a genetically inherited condition. Run that by me again, the world. How does that work? No, it's no one's fault. It's genetics, unless it's something else. But typically genetics is at play here for ADHD and autism, right? So it's not about them blame. It's about understanding. I feel like my life's difficult. I find these things difficult that maybe fit these labels. What I need you to know is if I had this in place, I'd feel more able. I'd feel that I could cope, right? So therefore, then it doesn't matter whether you're Gen Z or whether you're an old swine like me. It's not about the labels. It's about what's the consequence, what are the challenges, and what might I be able to achieve if those challenges are overcome, or if I've got some help with them, right? But I understand the reticence against labels from certain generations, because it does feel like an excuse. But it's not an excuse. The example I use for that as a counter very often is you could live all your life and not know until the day you're diagnosed that you have multiple sclerosis. And then after that point, very rapidly, you could go downhill cognitively, physically, emotionally. Everything could change for you. Are you going to sit there at that point and go, I'm not going to say it's MS because I never had it before?
That's a good
point. You did. It just didn't show. Right? You've always had it. It was always waiting, sadly. Now it's there. Right? Well, it's the same with the neurodivergent condition. You may have got 41 years through your life, and people might go, yeah, but Brad, you're really successful. You've got a gym. You've done all this stuff. How can you say you've got a problem? Because you're not seeing what's going on in here. You're not seeing the impact that all of those struggles have cumulatively. You're not seeing the mental health impacts. You don't see me sitting in the car rocking thinking, why am I so crap at? For example, right? You don't see me sobbing in my bedroom when I think no one's listening because I can't cope, because I've had another parking ticket or another bill, or I've forgotten to do something else that I really shouldn't have forgotten. Because on the outside, hey, you look like you're Mr. Successful. Right? That's the changing conversation. But that's again why I'm very much, the labels are for clinicians. Living with
the
it,
label
that's
doesn't
for you,
matter.
I, and anyone else.
It's how you cope with it.
It's what it does.
And
It's what it does.
speaking of coping, so you and I met through doing Ninja Warrior UK, and we were both probably in quite different points in our life then. And I don't know if you remember my kind of reason for going on the show and my story behind it. It was a long time ago now. So just for those listening,
I do. Yeah, your dad.
Yes. So just for those listening, it's not a story I tell a lot, but my father Graham passed away in July 2017, and the day he died, I got a phone call from ITV saying, "Do you want to do Ninja Warrior?" I was like, "No, go away. Like, today's not the day." And explain why. And to a TV producer, that is gold, isn't it? There's the ultimate sob story. Like, his dad's just died. So they said they were going to ring me back, and I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." And they phoned me back and said, "Did I want to do it?" And I was like, "You know what? I'm not going to go back to work in the meantime." Like, he'd been living with us, and life was a mess. It was awful. Like, for those that have lost a parent, particularly someone through, like, it was through cancer, and he'd lived with us, and we cared for him, so it was a massive loss. So they then phoned me again on the day of his funeral, like the morning of his funeral. There in a suit, and I was like, "Wow, what do you want? Go away." And they're like, "Oh, just let you know, you are in the show, and it's in 2 weeks. Get training." And I went to the funeral, and I used that as my the point at which life was going to get back to normal. And I just trained every day for 2 weeks. I just went out and I trained, and there was a ninja gym near here and a weights gym nearby, and I just trained every day for 2 weeks. Went and did the show, and I got to the top of that wall in the on the first round, and that was it. I was done. I didn't care as much in the semi-finals. We went back later that week, and I wasn't as bothered. Like, I didn't have the fire in my belly. And I said to the producers, "I know I've done what I set out to achieve. Thank you very much. This has got me through that really tough time." And it did. I know it's contrived and it's reality TV, but it genuinely gave me something to do in a time when I would have just sat on the sofa, and I might have spiraled. I might have done all sorts of silly things and it just gave me something to do. And like you spoke about earlier, nothing else mattered in my head while I was training or while I was running or while I was doing that thing, and just gave me a focus for a few weeks. So, and on that, and you kind of alluded to your reason for doing the show. Like, I don't know if you mind sharing, like, what took you to do that thing.
Yeah, it was all about my kids, right? So they had struggled already in school by that time, 2017, 2018. They'd already struggled a lot. They were home educated by then, so we'd had to remove them from school because they'd suffered bullying and exclusion and all sorts because they were different. And I felt, weirdly, I was a professional jester. Of all the jobs not to be proud of, it's your dad going around going, "Hi, I'm a fool," right? I mean, had to make you feel even more different. So when I was introduced to this thing called Ninja, and then it came to the UK, kind of like you, I saw it as, I have to do this to prove to everyone, but more importantly them, that it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you do or what you look like. You're as good as everyone else. You can do these things. And at that point as well, I was 3 years into knowing I had ADHD. Didn't know anything else happened, but I knew I'd been told that almost certainly it was ADHD, but I hadn't been diagnosed. So I was on this very evangelical mission of, hey, ADHD. Now, little did I know that probably 90% of the people in that studio that we sat with on those days recording probably have got ADHD as well, because it's a really common thing in those sports, right? It's kind of like you and you and you. And now I know lots of numbers of friends. Some of the best ninja athletes on the planet. Oh, what a surprise, ADHD and autism. But at that time, I wasn't so aware. So like you, all I wanted to do, nothing else mattered but get to the top of that wall once. Stand there, look my kids in the eye in the audience and go, "This is for you, and it's okay to be different." And I remember saying that and them cutting it and me being devastated. I was devastated that they cut that. But that's TV. But for me, it was all about showing them that they could do anything. They weren't confined by what they thought life should be because of autism at that point. And that's still something I'm trying to do by doing this. And I don't know, it's weird, isn't it? It's just a TV show. But actually, I came out of that with them saying that made us proud. And that meant a lot.
Yeah.
It meant a lot, and, like you, semi-final, not quite as good. Head wasn't in the right place. Fine. But I think it was just so important to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something that, both of us are proud of, and you can take that to your grave, that we did that. There's photos, there's videos.
This is
that was cool.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, it led me to a lot of other opportunities I would never have had. Yep. Been involved with the ninja sports stuff and opening the parks for a couple of years with some of the people. And I see the way the sport progresses now as a thing. And I'm really proud to have been a small part of that. But again, I keep coming back to the fact of it does so much good for so many people who don't know why.
Yeah. And I think that's what we find in our parkour
They haven't figured out why.
Yeah. Interestingly, we've been talking this week, and this is completely unrelated to me kind of getting in touch with you, but there's a lot of like synchronicity and meaningful coincidence that happens in life. We're looking at trying to do an academic study into the effects of parkour specifically on young people with ASD or with ADHD for the reasons we mentioned earlier, because of the way that it can engage them and it can stimulate them. I'd love to talk to you kind of offline about that. Because I think non-traditional and non-competitive sports, but sports that involve challenge, like ninja, like climbing, like parkour, are really good for neurodiverse people because of the way that it stimulates without pressure.
Without question, and we'll talk offline. I'll say this online. There's a concept within particularly ADHD and ASD known as rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is where this feeling that everything's an attack, everyone's against you, everything's out to prove you wrong. It's a horrible feeling. What you just said about non-competitive and very, very full body physical sports is so important because it's you. The only person you're being judged by when you do those sports is you. And I know parkour, I know climbing, I know ninja. They are three of the single most welcoming communities I've ever been a part of. I've never, even at competitions, nobody wants anyone to fail. Nobody is big-headed. It's such community. And for ADHDs and autistic people, that's massive because you go, oh, you mean I've got a place I belong where nobody's going to say I'm weird for wanting to do this? And it doesn't matter whether I'm a rank amateur or people think I'm the best in the world. We both get the same from it. Oh, hold on. That's special. That's really special. Because the minute it becomes a you versus me constant thing, that's a different conversation. And so, there's no doubts that the benefits are there. It's one of the most recommended non-medicinal sort of treatments, if you like, for those with ADHD. Exercise and make it full body. Right? Now, make it something that engages body and brain.
For those that are watching, just to give it a reference, we're recording this the day after the Euros final. So England were beaten by Spain last night. I'm not a big football guy, but that's what happened last night. And I use that as an example when I'm talking to schools and I'm talking to people who we're looking to engage with, particularly with neurodiverse young people. That stadium last night, there were 22 people on the pitch, 11 aside, playing football, and a stadium of thousands. Half of the people in that stadium, thousands of people, went home disappointed and upset last night because their team didn't win or they as players didn't win. You don't get that at parkour meet, a climbing meet, a ninja meet. Everyone goes home having feel like they've achieved something. And that's an amazing camaraderie and that community we've got that you don't get. I mean, football's a bad example because football's quite, like up against each other anyway. But rugby, football, tennis, someone's going to go home as a loser. And I don't experience that in our sports at all.
No, I never have. And again, I think that's why so many neurodivergent people are drawn to those sports without question. And there's an element as well, Brad. Look, if you take parkour and you look at, Seb Foucan, grandfather of parkour from Paris, right? There's an element to parkour, to climbing, to ninja of it's a little bit almost rule breaky, naughty. Yeah. It's not quote unquote normal, right? You mean I can navigate this building or this structure by learning certain skills? You mean I can scale this rock? You mean I can get across these obstacles that most people would think were impossible, right? And nobody's going to tell me that's wrong. Now, for the kids who may have never grown up being into team sports, my two particularly, right? They thrive on that sense of community. The only other area that, again, we see, although it's not quite as physical, is the growth of esports, as it's known now. It's a competitive video gaming. It's a similar community of we all just want to play our favorite games, and there's competition, but there's no massive them and us and butting up in tournaments. It's just, oh my God, look what we get to do. But that's because it is a little bit subversive. Yeah. And I think that's important, because when you've felt othered all your life, when you find your tribe, which is a phrase I use day in, day out, when you find your tribe and they want to do the same thing as you and celebrate you doing it, you're home. You have found your home, and you will have found it forever.
Oh, Matt, it's
right?
like
I might not have been to a ninja gym. Go on.
It's like you've been watching this podcast for the last 20 weeks, because we talk so much about third spaces, so home, work and school, or your third space, and having how important that is, and finding your tribe. I speak to people on a weekly basis, whether it be the gym or drama club. Drama club comes up a lot as the place where the misfits go.
Yeah.
And finding your tribe being so important in feeling belonging and having a good mental health.
Oh, it's massive, and it's underrated as well, or it's misunderstood. I don't know if it's underrated. It's misunderstood, that element of finding your tribe, right? But it is so important, and from a mental health perspective as well, right? Non-competitive sports, I think, are so important, where there's not you're better than me, you're stronger than me, we're all doing the same thing at our level, and I'm going to celebrate you for doing it. It's so good for individual mental health, and it's so good for both areas. And weirdly, there's an analogy. My son's a water sports instructor, paddle sport instructor, defined as. And this weekend he hasn't paddled for ages, but we went on a history tour of the Birmingham canals. There is a point to this, on sit on top kayaks. Right now, he's not instructed for 18 months, but he loves being on the water. Within 30 seconds of being on the water, I can see his demeanor change, and he calms down. Right? There was a woman, first time on a sit on top kayak, doing what everyone does, wobbling, panicking. Oh, I'm not like this. And my son was straight in there, calm, giving her advice, telling her she was okay, giving her tips while the people doing the tours were off. And when I spoke to him afterwards, I said, how does it make you feel? And it's the same as climbing. He makes me feel really good to help someone.
Yep.
Now, she didn't go, you're weird. Oh, you don't talk like everyone else. Or have you got ADHD or autism? She went, thank you. That's it. Thank you. Right? Because he's able to get as much from helping, coaching, as he is from doing. And I see that all the time in parkour gyms and ninja gyms and climbing gyms. That collaborative, that community piece is huge. And it's huge for us, neurodivergent, because for most of us, we've grown up feeling a little bit different. When you're told you're the weird kid, or you're too much, or you're not like everyone else, to suddenly find a space where everyone's not like everyone else, and actually we love that.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Cool. Yeah. Right? This is amazing stuff. My wish is that we could get more men of our age into these kind of activities later in life, that they don't think I'm too old or I'm too big or I'm too... Doesn't matter. Try it. Find your gang, right? And try it. Because I've seen it time and time again at the climbing gym that I used to sort of manage for a while. Groups of guys coming in, bit lost, bored with the gym, and suddenly we've got new climbers. And they're back every week. And all they're trying to beat is a route.
Yep.
Not each other. And it doesn't matter who gets it first or last, as long as they all nearly get there or get there.
Yep.
That, from a mental health perspective, forget neurodivergent or not, from a mental health perspective, that is vital in our society at the moment.
It's you against the challenge. It's not you against the other people.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. The challenge is there, but it's for everyone to beat. And I think that's what's really important, because it, you know, it is good. There's no two ways about it. It is good from a ADHD, autistic point of view. It does help. It does make people feel like they have a place and they're wanted. And
yeah, I say this wasn't supposed to be therapy for me, but I kind of feel like it has been. You've really like given me some food for thought. But we're getting sort of towards the end now, and I do want to ask, like, how's it changed your life? How's diagnosis and accepting and understanding neurodivergence affected your life?
Right. To answer that, I've got to give a general answer. It's now I'm in a really good place, because I accept who I am, what I am, why I am the way I am, and I talk about it and I'm passionate about it, and it's great. Initially, it was really tough. Now, I just recorded my podcast this morning about this topic, particularly about late diagnosis, and what we discussed was actually most people go through a version of grief when you get a diagnosis. Right. Doesn't matter whether you're the one that instigates seeking those answers. What inevitably has to come is a period of grieving everything that you tell yourself you could have been, should have been, might have been, didn't achieve, all the things you found difficult, all the XYZs. We have to go through that process and the full grief model before we can come to acceptance. And it's important that we know that in advance. It's important that that's part of seeking an assessment. Is this is going to rock your world. Even if you think you're doing it because you want to answer questions, it is going to literally flip everything upside down. And until it all settles in the new orientation, you're probably going to struggle in relationships. You might struggle at work. You might struggle with things you used to find easy. That's all okay, and it's perfectly normal, and it won't last forever. But until you know what your new normal feels like, and you can be confident that, okay, this is me, you have to feel unsettled, right? Now, I'm at that point. I'm lucky because of my job that maybe I've got there a bit quicker, because I mentor people. It allows me, kind of like you just said, it allows me to work through some of my own stuff quite regularly as well, and go, I've been there and I can share that. There is no timeline for this. I can't say, if you said, well, actually, I think I'm going to do this now, I can't say that if you got a diagnosis on the 1st of December, by the 1st of July, you'll feel great. I don't know.
No.
It's impossible, but I can tell you that you'll go through it. Fact. Right? Everyone will go through it. Having said all of that, where am I now? I'm at a place where I know who I am. I accept who I am. And I mean everything, from all the stuff I've achieved to all the problems I've had. I accept it all. I know why it's all important. I wouldn't change any of it, good or bad. There's not a bit I would change, because it's all got me to where I am now. And I'm just constantly very grateful that I'm in this space and I have these opportunities, and that, I have the ability to help people, which I think is all I ever wanted to do. I just didn't know how.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that meant. Right. And now I feel like I've got this, I've got this unique ability. Excuse me, I'll come back to you in a minute. I've just pressed something. Sorry, there I am. I've got this unique ability to help. Right. And I'm told that I do a good job, which is nice. I'm told that I make a difference, which is the only thing I could ask for. And every time I make a difference to someone else, I help myself a little bit more, and I help my kids a bit more, and I help my wife a bit more.
Yeah, and
I
you're a
can't
good
imagine
speaker.
being anything but grateful.
We've been speaking for the best
Oh,
part of an hour.
thank you.
You're a good speaker. You're engaging, and I'm really interested in what you've got to say. And I mean, it's relevant for me, and I hope it's relevant for a lot of people out there. So, where can people find more about Matt Gupwell and about what you're doing? How could they contact you if they're looking for advice or guidance? What do people do if they want to talk to you?
So primarily LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn, and it's just my name, Matt Gupwell, is where to find me. But my website is thinkneurodiversity.co.uk.
We'll have a thing,
and that's got everything there. Yeah, so that's got all the details of the corporate work and the training I do, as well as the mentoring and the speaking and everything else. And then Think Neurodiversity on Instagram as well. I still tend to sort of share bits and pieces there. So those are the three main places.
okay. I mean, it's been really useful, really, really useful chatting to you, and in a way that I didn't expect to. I thought Matt's a really interesting guy. I want to talk to him,
man.
And I'm like, wow, you've just like punched me in the face with stuff for the last hour. So there's a lot
and I held back, mate.
there's certainly more conversations we had, particularly around like studying the impact of sport on young people, and that's something that we've been running a CIC now for a couple of years, that we really want to look at more of that and supporting young people who don't feel like they fit in, because I think that's massively important. But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and yeah, there'll be more, man. I'm sure.
It's an absolute pleasure, and it's been too long, and I'll help whatever I can, but I'll tell you this, the idea you've got about kids is 100% spot on.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
It does help.